to remind us what we should cherish during our National Day of Prayer. As a memento of this morning's historic inaugural African lecture at the Museum of the Bible, we would like to honor President Akufo-Addo with this gift over here as a fine crystal replica of Museum of the Bible. I hope, Mr. President, that you will put it in a prominent place to remind you to pray for America and also to be reminded of our gratitude for your leadership in our nation and on your continent. On this National Day of Prayer, please join me in welcoming to Museum of the Bible to deliver our inaugural African lecture, the President of Ghana, President Akufo-Addo.
Chairman of the Board of the Museum of the Bible, eminent clergy, the chairperson and members of the Board of Trustees of the National Cathedral of Ghana, Ghana's Minister for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, Ghana's Minister for Finance, Ghana's Ambassador to the United States of America and members of the Ghanaian delegation, Chief Executive Officer of the Museum of the Bible, President of the National Day of Prayer Task Force, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great joy to be here for the second time at this magnificent Museum of the Bible, which celebrates the greatest and most enduring book of all time, the Bible. I first came to this museum some 3 years ago, on 8th February 2019. And on that day, I launched the Ghana National Cathedral Project in the United States. I'm grateful to Steve and Jackie Green for hosting me at the museum, showing me some of its priceless collections and artifacts, including Bibles translated into the languages of my country and my own language, Akan. I'm also grateful to them for joining us as special guests at the launch of the National Cathedral of Ghana. I went back home from that trip with a profound sense of awe for what has been done here, and deep admiration for the commitment of Steve Green and his family to building such a world-class monument to celebrate the Bible. The Museum of the Bible here has been an inspiration to us as we build the National Cathedral of Ghana and the Bible Museum of Africa. Incidentally, the work on the Bible Museum of Africa is led by the indefatigable Carrie Summers, the founding president of the Museum of the Bible, and the same world-class project team that worked on the Museum of the Bible here in Washington. This appropriation of the lessons and expertise from the Museum of the Bible to Ghana is the ultimate expression of our admiration and tribute to this remarkable world-class museum that the Green family and the team have built here. I thank Steve Green, the leadership of the Museum of the Bible, the President, Kathy Branzel, and the members of the 2022 National Day of Prayer Task Force for the honor of this invitation. I recognize the significance of the moment as being the first African leader to speak here. The invitation from Steve Green asked me to deliver the Museum of the Bible's Inaugural Africa lecture. The essence of an inaugural lecture, I believe, is the presentation of insights from a body of work to which the lecturer has devoted his life's work. My life's work has been located not in the world of academia, from which the concept of the inaugural lecture emerged, but in the nexus of law and politics. Both professions do not usually make room for the easy practice of religion and faith. Indeed, some have been known even to question the possibility of a person of faith being successful either as a lawyer or as a politician. Being a lawyer has always come with its own pressures, which mount when you are a person of faith. But the pressures are far greater for a politician who is a person of faith. I want to use the opportunity of this lecture to explore the practice of law and politics as a Christian. In this atmosphere of the Bible Museum, and under my current circumstances, I'm probably going to spend more of the time on the politician than on the lawyer. I'm a Christian who is in politics and is unashamed of asserting my Christian faith as part of my political calling. And I freely admit that my vision for my country and Africa's transformation is heavily influenced by the Bible. Ladies and gentlemen, I was born into a family of deep Presbyterian convictions. My maternal ancestry includes great-grandparents who, with great personal sacrifice, were pioneer evangelists of the Presbyterian faith and are widely acknowledged as such. And my paternal ancestry encompasses iconic 19th century Presbyterian priests whose evangelical ministries remain enduring legacies and inspirations for successive generations of Presbyterian priests. My own parents, as you can imagine, were staunch Presbyterians. I was baptized a Presbyterian and became an Anglican, much of the vehement protests of my parents as a result of the secondary school I attended in England. Let us say I became enamored with the rituals, daily matins, and evensong, and the additional Sunday Eucharist, which were constant features of my 4-year stay at school in Lansing. Anglican or Presbyterian, the crucial part of the Christian upbringing drilled into me was that Christianity was a way of life, an everyday experience, and meant far more than going to church, which, by the way, was obligatory in the Oforiata and Akufo-Addo homes. The Bible was a focal point in our home, and my parents found an apt bit of scripture for every situation that came up in our lives. In my own life as an adult, whether as a lawyer or as a politician, I've always tried not to lose sight of the fact that my Christian faith should be an integral part of the practice of my chosen profession. Ladies and gentlemen, in the public mind, being a lawyer can pose dilemmas that might be difficult to reconcile with being a Christian. Please allow me to illustrate this phenomenon by citing an often quoted advertisement on a billboard for a law office in an American city, which is the perfect example to spell out the bewilderment with the law that many people face. The advertisement on the billboard read, and I quote, "Just because you did it doesn't mean you're guilty," unquote. Those who are lawyers would readily understand the point being made here, but we can also appreciate the mischief that this would cause amongst the public. The question that should therefore exercise the attention of the Christian lawyer is, are you being seen as someone who helps the guilty get away with their crimes once they have the money to buy your services? Or are you seen as the defender of the oppressed and the voiceless? Often in law practice, things are not quite as cut and dried as they would seem or as one would wish. There would be times when no amount of experience or intellectual rigor will prepare you for the vicissitudes of the legal playground. On such occasions, it helps to be able to hark back to your faith and maybe the sound of your mother singing that ancient hymn, "Who is on the Lord's side?" It helps to be on the Lord's side when you purport to seek or arbitrate for justice amongst humans. As I said, Christianity is a way of life, and the legal practice covers all aspects of our everyday lives. Let me quote from Sir Walter Besant's legal novel, The Ivory Gate, in which the author paints a most optimistic view of a lawyer in refreshing contrast to the way lawyers are usually portrayed in other books. It is a longish quote, but please bear with me. He says, "The solicitor is always engaged in considering how best to guide his fellow man through the labyrinthine world. He receives his fellow man at his entrance into life as a ward. He receives him grown up as a client. He advises him all his life, at every step and in every emergency. If the client goes into partnership, or marries, or buys a house, or builds one, or gets into trouble, the solicitor advises and assists him. When the client grows old, the solicitor makes his will. When the client dies, the solicitor becomes executor and his trustee and administers his estate. I know not of any other profession, unless it be medicine, that so much can be said of. And think what terrors, what anxieties, what disappointments the solicitor witnesses and alleviates. Think of the family scandals he hushes up and keeps secrets. If a solicitor in large practice were to tell what he knows, think of the terrible disclosures. He knows everything. He knows more than a Roman Catholic priest, because his penitents not only reveal their own sins, but also those of their wives and sons and friends and partners," unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not a fiction. It is a fact that the solicitor knows more than a Roman Catholic priest and carries greater responsibilities. It certainly helps to be a Christian and have an anchor that steadies you as you maneuver the turbulence of the everyday life that is legal practice. My other profession, politics, is no less turbulent. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been in the maelstrom of public life in Ghana for 45 years. That is most of my adult life. I've been dissatisfied with the condition of life of the majority of our people. And that is why I have struggled to get the opportunity to do something about it. The story of my struggles to become president of my country are well known. My experiences have been a testimony, in my view, of God's love and a vindication of the words of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in the Gospel according to St. Matthew, chapter 19, verse 26, which says, "With man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible." It took 3 tries between 2008 and 2016 for me to get elected, by which time the popular catchphrases of Akufo-Addo cannot be president, God does not want Akufo-Addo to be president, Akufo-Addo is short and does not have the stature to be president, had become so prevalent, You had to be firmly rooted in your faith to have had the courage to persist. I committed that third election campaign to God and indicated to the Ghanaian people that the battle is the Lord's. Amen. By God's grace, I won a famous victory against an incumbent president by a gap of nearly 1 million votes, the largest margin of victory. The largest margin of victory for 2 decades. And by the same grace, I won re-election in the December 2020 elections, and I'm now in my second and last term as president. If the practice of law is a minefield for a Christian, it is double jeopardy for a Christian politician, and even more so for a Christian president. Just take a deep breath and think of a number of things that upset you about your societies, about your neighborhood, about the news headlines, about Ukraine, about the astronomical rise in the cost of freight charges and in the cost of living. Somewhere in there would be the president as the target of your anger or bewilderment. Take this president standing before you. I was into the beginning of the 4th year of my first term in 2020. Things were looking reasonably good, and I could look forward to a straightforward election campaign in December of that year. Then COVID happened and struck. What do you do when the entire population of a country is in the grips of the fear of the unknown? When the experts confess they're having to learn every day about an unknown virus? What does the president do when your people are looking up to you for reassurance and for guidance? As I've said at another forum about the COVID-19 pandemic, might well be that to future generations, it will look quite obvious what should have been done. But 2 years ago, it felt like we had fallen into a dark, malicious, and terrifying abyss. I'm not sure how those who do not have faith managed it. But I know I committed our nation, Ghana, our Ghanaian people, our health workers, our scientists, our national COVID task force into the hands of the Almighty. And we worked hard. It was part of the upbringing that prayer needs hard work to bring results. We hope the worst of it is behind us, and we never have to go through such an experience ever again. The consequences of the pandemic will, of course, be with us long after nose masks have ceased to be mandatory items of clothing. We've, however, learned lessons that is enabling us to strengthen our healthcare infrastructure better to meet any future health crisis. The economic devastation has been more widespread and intense than anyone had anticipated, and is leading to anxiety and an acute loss of confidence in the systems through which our societies have been run for decades. It has been a steep learning curve for all of us to discover just how truly interdependent our world had become. We discovered the truth about our world having become a global village, not just from a rampaging malicious virus, but from the effects also of a military adventure of a big neighbor displaying its might against a smaller neighbor. The bombs might not be falling in our cities and towns thousands of miles away, but we in Ghana and Africa are certainly feeling the effects of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. At petrol stations and at supermarkets, we feel the effect of the war in the increase in prices. We discover that far-off wars have local consequences. It suddenly matters to the rich and powerful nations of the world what African countries think about events in the world. After years of complaining about the archaic and unfair structure of the United Nations, especially the composition of the Security Council, established at the time when virtually all of Africa was in colonial bondage and was thus not present at San Francisco, it seems finally to be dawning on the powerful nations that the institutions of the world need to be reformed to reflect current realities. Let us hope this urge does not peter out as it has done in the past. I must mention one other challenge facing us as a people, and that is the environment and the devastation of our lands and water bodies. Climate change is not a delusion, as some would have us believe. It is an existential threat with visible impacts in major cities across Africa, including Accra, Lagos, Cairo, and Johannesburg, which have all experienced devastating floods in recent years. The yearly loss of about 5 kilometers of land to desertification at a time Africa's population is growing rapidly also creates a problem for farmers, as depleted vegetation leads to failed crops and loss of livelihoods. Herdsmen in various countries have also been forced to move in search of feed for their cattle, which lead inevitably to clashes with distressed farmers. It is my view that if you have faith in God, you would want to care for the environment and recognize the importance of preserving the balance of nature. Respecting the global commitments that we defined at COP21 in Paris, that is in the Paris Agreement, and at COP26 in Glasgow, is a fundamental obligation of our era. As I indicated in my introductory remarks, I am a Christian in politics, who's unashamed of asserting my Christian faith as part of my political calling. It is this faith and this belief in God's power to transform difficult situations into beacons of hope that has animated my vision for me moving Ghana to a situation beyond aid and putting the country onto the road of self-reliance, sustained progress, and prosperity. Our march to a brighter future is underpinned by our firm attachment to a governance system that respects individual human rights and individual liberties, the rule of law, and the principles of democratic accountability. This faith is also the motivation for one of the major projects, which I have described as the priority of priorities, that we're undertaking in the country. This is the construction of the National Cathedral of Ghana, which first brought us to this venue 3 years ago in February 2019. The National Cathedral addresses a missing link in our nation's architecture by providing a formal space for the religious activities of the state. Designed by the iconic global Ghanaian architect, David Adjaye, who designed the National Museum of African American History and Culture here in Washington, D.C. The National Cathedral provides an interdenominational space for worship and will serve to insert God at the center of our nation-building efforts. We've integrated a Bible museum and biblical garden as part of the project. Dubbed the Bible Museum of Africa and Biblical Gardens of Africa, they extend the National Cathedral project, which will transform Ghana, over 70% of whose population are self-proclaimed Christians, into a major center of Christianity in Africa. The work of the Bible Museum and Biblical Gardens is being led by Kerry Summers, the founding president of the Museum of the Bible, and the world-class project team that worked on the museum here. The Bible Museum of Africa will represent a key development in African Christianity, seeking to replicate what is here. It explores the history, narrative, and impact of the Bible. However, the distinguishing character would be a special thematic focus on Africa and Africans in the Bible, and the Bible in Africa. It will help illustrate the neglected role of the centrality of the Coptic Church in Egypt and the Christian Church in Ethiopia in the early development of global Christianity. It will also provide the history of the church in Africa, as well as in the African diaspora. For the African diaspora, it will tell the redemptive history of the misuse of the Bible to dehumanize the African and justify his or her enslavement, and the paradoxical deployment of the Bible as a redemptive tool to build community and leadership for the civil rights movement in the Americas. The history, roles, and impact of the Black church will also be told, offering the diaspora a pathway mediated by faith to reconnect with Africa, 50% of whose population, i.e. 650 million people, are Christians. The Nassau Cathedral of Ghana and the Bible Museum of Africa will also serve as a convening platform for national, African, and global conversations on the role of the Christian faith in contemporary times. The cathedral will have an auditorium space of 5,000, expandable to 17,000, chapels, prayer rooms, banquet halls, and will include a 350-seater biblical restaurant, whose menu will be inspired by the celebrated chef, Todd Gray, who runs the Manor Restaurant here at the museum. The National Cathedral and Black Bible Museum of Africa are thus being developed as Ghana's gifts to the Christian community worldwide. That is a safe space to organize key national, regional, and global Christian activities. For instance, we envisage alternating the Museum of the Bible's African lectures between Washington and Accra. Construction of the National Cathedral and Bible Museum of Africa is also directly linked to our overarching vision of creating a Ghana beyond aid. The vision seeks to transform Ghana into an aid-free country and lays due emphasis on the software underpinnings of development, values, mindset, attitudes, and behavior of citizens. The National Cathedral and the Bible Museum will be central to the realization of this vision. First, through the deployment of the biblical values necessary for its attainment. And second, by seeking to turn Ghana into a major site for religious pilgrimage and tourism. It becomes a key platform for economic transformation. But even more directly, by putting Ghana, God, and our religious faith at the center of our nation-building efforts, the National Cathedral and Bible Museum project will move the country beyond the structures of the aid system, a development system that has traditionally ignored and marginalized religion or sought to instrumentalize it, as is happening in recent years. We seek your support in helping to bring this transcendental project to fruition. Construction of the project in Accra, Ghana's capital, led by a committee of the prominent Christian leaders of the nation, several of whom have made the journey from Accra to be with us here today, has begun in earnest. I'm of the firm belief that as much as possible, the building of the National Cathedral and Bible Museum should not be a burden on the state. That is why we're mobilizing the Christian community at home and abroad and other well-meaning persons to join us in partnership to raise the needed resources to complete the project. We seek to build this partnership on the rich history of the church's involvement in Ghana's development. Ultimately, the goal is to build an international coalition in support of the project. This will be a historic coalition, and the names of its supporters will be written in gold in the annals of our history and in the annals of Christianity. In my address at the 2019 U.S. National Prayer Breakfast at the Washington Hilton on February the 7th, 2019, I recalled the words of the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, for many, America's greatest president, and I quote, "My concern is not whether God is on our side. My greatest concern is to be on God's side, for God is always right." Unquote. This has been the central thrust of this inaugural lecture. I want to be on God's side. I want Ghana to be on God's side. And we will be an example to the black peoples of the world of what a free, dedicated, innovative people who believe and trust in God can do to build a nation the equal of anywhere on the face of the planet. Thank you for your attention. And may God bless us all. Thank you.